Hi, Myrna.
Hi.
Hi, Mr. Pierce. This is Sophia Nelson with the City Planning Department. Are you here to speak on an item?
Hello, this is Kevin Pierce. I'm an attorney with the developer on the first item on the regular agenda, but I will not be speaking.
Okay. If you, for some reason, needed presentation abilities, just send me a chat and I'll promote you so that you have those capabilities. Thank you.
Thank you. It should be Mr. And I apologize.
It's okay.
Always continually butcher his last name.
Oh, I get it.
It's Matt Shafizadeh.
Okay. I'll keep an eye out for his name and promote him when I see him.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Sure. Hi, Dan. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Are you here on a particular item tonight that you'll need to speak on, or are you just listening?
Just listening in.
Okay,
Brian will take care of all the questions and concerns and comments
okay.
when I'm here on the Sunset Hills.
Thank you. Hi, Travis.
How's it going?
Good, thanks for being here. It sounds like you have a busy week.
Yeah. They decided they were going to show up
Oh,
right after the first year, so.
very nice. Well, at least you get it over with.
Well, and in the past, they're in office,
Mm-hmm.
so then they schedule meetings. So they're doing it remotely. So basically, we were just told,
Be ready.
call you and make sure you answer.
Oh, geez, that is tough. So you're just on standby then?
Basically.
Hello, hello, hello.
Welcome, Jay.
Hey, Ursel, it looks like we have a quorum, so I'm gonna go to bed. I'm not feeling well.
That's fine.
All right, well, I wanted to let you know. So,
All right, thank you.
yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
All right, good evening, everyone. Today is January 5th, 2021. Time is 6 p.m. This is the City of Georgetown, Texas Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And at this time, I'm going to ask Myrna Garcia, our staff liaison, to call the roll so we can officially establish which commissioners are in attendance. Myrna,
Hi, Happy New Year, everyone.
the same to you.
Thank you. Cherie Heinzman.
She texted me and said she will be a few minutes late.
Okay. Kayla McCord.
Here.
Marlene McMichael.
Here.
Travis Perthias.
I am here.
Ursel Brashear.
Here.
Alex Fuller. I believe you're muted, Alex. Tim Haney. Jerry McCulley. Jim Sawyer.
All right, now Jerry McCulley is logged in. I didn't hear him respond.
I'm sorry, I couldn't get the button to work. I am here.
Okay,
And I believe that Jim Sawyer just logged on as well.
okay, thank you. Gives me 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have 4 commissioners who are here, 1 that's on their way. That would give me 5, but right now I have 4. Do I need to add 1 from the alternates? Sophia?
Excuse me. If you have 4, you have quorum, and so you do not need to add an alternate.
Okay, so then we have quorum and we have 1 on their way. So we'll start with 4. I'll now officially call the meeting to order. And I want to welcome everyone to this regularly scheduled Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Commission members are appointed by the mayor and the city council for the purpose of reviewing land use applications. For some applications, the commission is the final authority. For others, notably those items such as zoning and annexation, the commission acts in an advisory body, and as such just makes recommendations to the council for their final determination. Tonight's meeting is being held as a teleconference. The complete agenda and all supporting documents for each of the items to be dealt with this evening has been posted on the city's website and is available for public review. In a few moments, we're going to hear from Sophia Nelson, the city's planning director, who will walk us through the process of how all parties can participate in this teleconference meeting. Tonight's agenda is divided into 3 sections: a regular session agenda, a consent agenda, then a legislative regular agenda. As to the consent agenda, any items that the director considers routine and non-controversial, or any items that don't require a public hearing, are grouped together and they can be decided on by a single motion. That being said, any item on the consent agenda can be moved to the legislative regular agenda for a full presentation and discussion by the commission by either a commissioner or members of the public. So prior to taking any action on the consent agenda, I'll first ask if any commissioners have any items they want to abstain on, or if they have any items they want pulled from the consent agenda and moved to the legislative regular agenda. After that, we'll ask any members of the public if they have any item on the consent agenda that they want pulled and moved to the legislative regular agenda. If we have any that are pulled, they will be acted upon individually. As to the legislative regular agenda, each item that's listed for action will be discussed and acted on individually. The process that we're going to follow this evening is that step one, we'll announce the agenda item and the file number for the item being considered. City staff will begin by reading the caption for the item for the record and then making a presentation to the commission and to the public. At the conclusion of the staff presentation, the commission will then have an opportunity to ask questions of staff regarding the item. After the commission has completed their questions for staff, the applicant will be given up to 5 minutes to make a presentation to the commission. Whoever Blake is, would you mute your phone there or your connection, please? Thank you. And then we have someone else who's John Teague. You're active, and I think we're getting some feedback from you, please, sir. Thank you very much. After the commission has completed their questions for staff, the applicant can have up to 5 minutes to make a presentation. The commission will then have an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant. At the conclusion of the applicant's presentation, we'll then open the floor to public comments. When it is your turn to address the commission, please begin your comments by stating your name and address for the record. Speakers will have up to 3 minutes to address the commission unless there's another person present and signed up to address the commission that's willing to transfer their time, in which case you will have up to 6 minutes to address the commission. After everyone who has signed up to address the commission has spoken, the public hearing will be closed. The applicant will be provided up to 3 minutes of rebuttal time to respond to any public comments if they so choose. At that point, discussion of the item moves to the dais. Commissioners will engage in the deliberation process with the goal of adopting a formal action on the item. All right, that being said, that takes us to Sophia. Would you mind walking us through how we're going to run this meeting this evening, please?
Yes, thank you. Sophia Nelson, Planning Director for the City of Georgetown. Just a few participation notes for the audience. Thank you for being here. But please remember to mute yourself when you're not speaking. We are recording this meeting, and so by you muting yourself, we're able to get the best sound quality possible for the meeting and for everybody participating today. Please state your name when speaking. This is for audience as well as for commissioners. This will help in our minutes taking, and then it helps with the audience understanding who's speaking at a particular time as well, especially those on the telephone. For public hearing items, there are a few ways to participate when there is public hearing associated with an item tonight. The first is by entering your name into the chat function. When the public hearing is opened, I will first start by reading any names and inviting those participants to speak first. Once we have gone through the names, I'll move through any hands raised on Zoom. And then finally, after we've gone through all the participants who have a hand raised, we'll check in with anybody that is participating via telephone and ask for them to speak to wrap up the public hearing. If you need any assistance during this meeting, please use the chat function. You can chat me directly, Sophia Nelson, and I will do my best to help you while the meeting is going on. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Sophia. That takes us to item A on our agenda, which is the public wishing to address the board. The City Council provides the public an opportunity to address the board on any matter that's not posted on the agenda. What we ask is that you contact the staff liaison for the Planning Commission. And you need to do that at least a week before the meeting that you would like to speak to us, so we can get you identified and get your topic identified and get it posted properly so you can participate. At the time of this posting, no persons have signed up to address the board, so that will take us to the consent agenda. And tonight, the consent agenda consists of items B through AJ. And these are, this is a list that can be acted on with one single motion. But before we do that, Commissioners, I need to ask, do you have any items on the consent agenda that you need to abstain on? Now's your time to notify me. Okay, not hearing anything. Commissioners, do you have any items on the agenda that you want to pull and move to the legislative regular agenda? Okay, are there any members of the public who are here that would like to have any items listed on the consent agenda that you want us to pull and move to the legislative regular agenda? I'm not seeing any hands go up. So Commissioners, as to the consent agenda, the floor is open to a motion.
Ursula, this is Travis. I'm sorry I didn't get in there fast enough, but I need to abstain on N.
Item N.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Then the floor is still open for a motion, Commissioners.
This is Kayla McCord. Move to accept the consent agenda, items B through AJ as presented, with the exception of item N.
Okay. Do I have a second?
This is Marlene McMichael. I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Myrna, call the roll, please.
Kayla McCord,
Yes.
Marlene McMichael,
Yes.
Travis Perthius,
Yes.
Ursula Brashear.
Yes. Okay, so the motion carries 4-0. And that will take us to item N. We're going to keep that on consent. Do I have a motion as to item N? Wait a minute, I'll only have 3 votes on that item. I can't pass that.
For this item, excuse me, Chair, I didn't realize when you asked me earlier about moving somebody up, but I do believe you would need to move one alternate up for this item so that you have a quorum.
Okay, so let's pull, let's see, the last one up by my records was Alex Fuller. Alex, are you here this evening?
Yes.
Would you consent to be moved to the agenda?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do I have any motion on item N?
This is Kayla McCord. Move to accept item N as to disapprove item N as recommended.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion for disapproval on item N. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Alex Fuller is the second. Any discussion? Myrna, call the roll, please.
Kayla McCord,
Yes.
Marlene McMichael,
I didn't get in fast enough on the discussion. This is Marlene, but I'm confused. We're voting down item N. Is that correct?
That was the staff recommendation to disapprove that item. And so we essentially are saying that we are voting to approve the staff recommendation, which was a denial.
I'll vote yes.
Thank you.
Ursula Brashear,
Yes.
Alex Fuller.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries 4-0. Alex, thank you. We'll now return Travis to the podium. All right, that takes us to our legislative regular agenda, and we start this evening with item AK, and this is file number 2020-27-REZ. Nat Wagner, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commission. Nat Wagner, Long Range Plan Manager. Please let me know when you have seen the opening slide, which is 2951 FM 1460, case number 2020-27-REZ.
That is up on the dais now. If you would start by reading the caption for this for us, please.
Yes, sir. The item before you tonight is the rezoning of a portion of the property at 2951 FM 1460 from C1 local commercial to the MF1 low density multifamily district. The subject property is located approximately 1,200 feet north of the intersection of Westinghouse Road and FM 1460 in the southern portion of the city limits of Georgetown, providing you an overview map here now. The area near the intersection of FM 1460 and Westinghouse Road is characterized by low-density commercial development to the southwest, vacant land to the northwest and southwest, institutional uses, Carver Elementary, the GISD school, and a private cemetery in the northwest quadrant of the intersection. North and south of Westinghouse Road is the ETJ subdivision of Terra Vista. Zooming in a little bit closer on the subject property, which I've highlighted for you here in red, to give you a sense of its development. The subject property is currently vacant and is generally flat. The property is within the Edwards Aquifer Transition Zone and devoid of any significant natural features that would impact its development. The eastern portion of the site does contain some trees, but not at a significant density. The future land use plan for the city of Georgetown, as you know, commissioners, is not meant to be a parcel specific map. It gives us a general land use pattern for which the city is striving for by 2030, and it's to be generally applied. And so the boundaries are meant to be interpreted based on major roadways, geographic features, and geopolitical boundaries like the school district or municipal utility districts or established developments. This is the case here with this property that I've highlighted for you in thatched black. You can see that a portion of the site is within that light tan colored future land use category, which is the mixed density neighborhood future land use designation. And the remainder of the site is in the community center node. To give you a sense of how properties surrounding this property are entitled, give you an overview of the zoning map here. You can see that the property is identified in thatched black. It is currently zoned C1. It also is within the Gateway Overlay zoning district and is surrounded by, to the east, multifamily zoning districts, and to the south, abutting it, commercial zoning districts. West of the subject property across FM 1460 is the Terra Vista subdivision, which is in the ETJ. It is not in the city limits and therefore does not have zoning. And then south of that, Terra Vista subdivision is the Carver Elementary. Also want to share with you that the subject property was annexed in 2006 and initially zoned agriculture. In 2007, a planned unit development with base zonings of C1, commercial, local commercial, and multifamily was approved. In 2015, that PUD was removed and the current zoning configuration was established. The Wheeler tract, preliminary tract, which was first approved in 2016 and then amended in 2018, 2019, and 2020, is to subdivide approximately 52 acres into 8 lots to be developed with a mix of commercial and multifamily uses. So when looking at what is on the ground today versus what the 2030 plan aspires to, we do use a tool called target ratios to evaluate the balance of land uses in the area. So within the mixed density neighborhood future land use, today approximately 62% of the uses are residential and less than 1% are non-residential. And you can see on the left-hand side that the 2030 plan target ratio provides a guidance of 80% residential uses and 20% non-residential. The balance of what's on the ground today is unentitled or in the ETJ. This is a significant area in terms of acreage, it represents about 1,263 acres. This site, again, not parcel specific, but looking at the map, it does represent about 5 of the acres of the development are in the mixed density neighborhood, which overall constitutes less than 1% of the overall future land use category of mixed density neighborhood in this area. As I mentioned, a portion of this property is also in the community center future land use node. And this node is approximately 117 acres in size. And roughly about 2 acres of this property is within that community center future land use, which represents approximately 1.7% of that node. I'd like to note here that 20% of the uses are residential and approximately 29% are non-residential, with the remainder of the land zoned agriculture or unentitled being in the ETJ. Please note that the Terra Vista subdivision, which is in the ETJ, is included in those 20% of land identified as residential use. When we look to the future land use plan of the 2030 plan, we have a description for what the city envisions mixed density neighborhoods to constitute. They are primarily residential in nature. They do allow for non-residential supporting uses like limited neighborhoods serving retail, office, institutional, and civic uses. This future land use category, given its residential nature, does provide or allow for a variety of housing types. Those can include duplexes, townhomes, and moderate density multifamily, which is what is before you tonight. We look to whether or not the development pattern that is being proposed is compatible to what's on the ground today in terms of lot sizes, setbacks, and building design. And this future land use category does support non-residential uses and strives for that connectivity between the residential and non-residential. As I mentioned, it also shares the community center future land use node, which is a commercial future land use in nature. It strives for 80% of its uses to be non-residential, with 20% of those in the node to be supporting residential. Those residential uses can be medium to high density residential, which is what is being proposed here tonight. These future land use nodes are located in and around arterials, and they are to support the community of Georgetown. So they can support mid-sized development and local retail. And their development and their design is important because these centers do abut generally other residential uses, which is also the case before you tonight. The applicant is requesting multifamily 1 zoning designation. I want to provide for you here what those standards are in terms of the number of units per acre, as well as some of the setbacks that go into designing the site. Multifamily 1 is meant to support a range of moderate density housing products like apartments and which are attached. It can also support detached type multifamily, which can take the form of triplexes or fourplexes. When designing and locating multifamily 1, we look for convenient access because of the volume of traffic, which both Westinghouse and FM 1460 do provide. These zoning district MF1 is appropriate to residential developments, including the case which is here tonight to the north, which I'll walk you through in a little bit greater detail in the following slides. And also appropriate in non-residential districts, which you do find to the south of this property. To give you a sense of what is allowed within the MF1 zoning district, the permitted by right includes mostly moderate density multifamily, but it can also include things like group homes and boarding houses. Those things which are permitted with limitations include more of the commercial uses like daycares or wireless transmission facilities. They can also include recreational facilities like parks, neighborhood parks, schools, which you see Carver to the south and west of this property, and daycare. There are UDC criteria which we evaluate and provide to you for your consideration as you make your recommendation. In terms of the application, staff did find that it was complete. In terms of it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, the request to rezone the property does not support the target ratios of either the mixed density neighborhood nor the community center future land use categories. And I'll walk you through those findings in the next 2 slides. The rezoning of the property, criteria number 3, will not adversely affect the health, safety, and general welfare of the immediate properties, particularly those residential developments to the north, which are in the ETJ. As the subject property serves as a transition between those low density residential uses and the more intense commercial uses to the south. The rezoning request does have an impact to the orderly development of FM 1460 corridor, particularly the area between Interloop to the north and Westinghouse to the south, as this property is at that intersection which anchors the southern boundary of the city limits. And the impact is that many of the properties between Interloop to the north and Westinghouse to the south are not in the city limits. And the city has very limited capacity to involuntarily annex or provide land use controls for those properties along FM 1460. And FM 1460 is a major commercial corridor for the city of Georgetown. And to be able to manage their development in accordance with the future land use plan is critical. So it's important, therefore, that properties within the city limits, such as this subject property, do develop in accordance with the adopted land use plan, particularly at the target ratios. FM 1460 is important for 2 reasons. One, it provides access to retail and commercial uses for the surrounding residential the existing surrounding residential uses. And it provides an opportunity for the city to generate a healthy tax base, which is important for the fiscal health of the city. So I'd like to go back to the second criteria about the comprehensive plan, if I may, for just a second. So we found that it partially complies, as it does provide that transition from residential to commercial with the provision of the low density. It does add diversity of housing to this area of Georgetown, which is primarily detached single family. So it does comply in that regard with what the 2030 plan is trying to achieve. Within the community center, the subject property is intended to complement and support other like uses that include the high density multifamily. So we do find that as it complies with it being a supporting and complementary land use. However, it does not comply with land use policy number 1, which strives for a balance of land uses between residential, commercial, and employment. And we know that balance, one way to evaluate that balance is through the target ratios. And the existing ratio of residential to non-residential in this area is 62% to 0.6%, with the remainder 37% being ag or unentitled. If approved, in which you can see in the far right bar of this graph, this request will reduce the target share of commercial land uses in the mixed density neighborhood future land use area. Similarly, with the community center, moderate density multifamily, like what they're asking for, is appropriate within the community center. So it's a partially complies. However, these multifamily uses are intended to be secondary to the non-residential. And as you can see here, the percent share of existing residential uses in this community center, which is meant to be commercial, already exceeds the target ratio. And with the request, we'll further reduce the share of commercial land uses in this node. The subject property is bordered to the north by large lot single-family homes and collectively has a density of 1.66 units per gross acre, which is similar to the low-density developments we see in the periphery of the city limits in areas such as western and eastern Georgetown along Highway 29, as well as areas out west along Williams Drive. And the MF1 zoning district, which is what the applicant is requesting, does allow for a range of housing products such as duplex, townhome, which are complementary to the residential uses to the north and can appear like single-family products. The proposed configuration of C3, what's on the ground today, the proposed configuration of C3, C1, MF2, and MF1 is logical and consistent. It provides those transitions of density of residential product as well as intensity of commercial uses. And the current zoning configuration on the greater parent tract, which is known as the Wheeler tract, centers most of the intense zoning districts at its core and transitions them out towards FM 1460. The low density MF1 zoning along the sides and rear of the local commercial zoning district along the frontage roads is appropriate. And the proposed location of the MF1 zoning is consistent with this transition. However, the proposed MF1 zoning would reduce the amount of commercial development in this area. As required by the Unified Development Code, we did notify surrounding property owners. We did place advertisements in the Williamson County Sun and signs were posted on the property. To date, staff has not received any comments in opposition. In short, commissioners, this is the rezoning of a portion of property at, excuse me, I have the incorrect address here. I apologize for that. That is, the address is 2951 FM 1460. I apologize for that. It is a rezoning request. And per the UDC, the Planning and Zoning Commission shall hold a public hearing and make a recommendation to the City Council. The applicant is present tonight and does have a presentation prepared.
Okay, thank you, Nat. Commissioners, questions for staff? Nat, I have, I'm not seeing anyone respond just yet. Let me ask you a question, if you would, please. The applicant's letter of intent contained in Exhibit B, which identified the conflicting area between the, I guess the community center and the mixed density neighborhood. And based on that letter, it looks like there's a very small sliver of that property that's actually subject to the conflict. But your drawing shows a much broader area of conflict. Have you looked at that? Are you comfortable with the graph that you've included?
I think you bring up the central point to this case, which is that these land uses aren't parcel specific, and determining how much of the subject property is in the future land use, given that this is, it appears to have two future land uses. Generally speaking, we use roadways or natural terrain features to help figure out what the physical boundary of that future land use is. We don't have that here in this case. So we made our best assertion given our future land use map and where the property was identified to make that split. And we used our GIS or our computer application software to tell us the acreage and then figure out what the target ratios were from there. So in terms of identifying where physically the future land use begins and ends is not something I am confident, because that is a bubble map. But using GIS, I can tell you that the map, the way it's drawn in the computer, did tell me the number of acres that each property falls within that future land use category, and that's how I use to divide the ratios.
Okay. The second is that question I have really has to do with the apparent conflict between the future land use and the existing zoning. To me, the future land use was modified after this zoning was created through the PUD, and then the PUD was amended, and the property was taken out of the PUD and then zoned. But then the 2030 plan was amended, and is that the correct sequence?
Yes, sir, that's correct. My understanding is that the PUD was last amended in 2015. So it was removed in 2015, and then we updated the future land use plan starting in 2019, finished it in 2020.
So if we had specifically focused on this parcel at the time the 2030 plan was being amended, because that was more a citywide operation and not a parcel specific operation. If we had focused on the existing zoning at this location at that time, would we have a mixed use component included inside of this zoning classification of C1?
I think the difficulty with this, if we kind of zoom out for a second on the land use in this area, if we kind of think about the southeast quadrant of Georgetown, which this represents a significant portion as it's in the future land use plan. This portion of Georgetown and southeast quadrant is dominated by residential single family. There is a lack of commercial activity in this area, and part of the comprehensive plan update, there was a focus on making sure that we reserved enough land for commercial uses. And so we were, as a community, intentional in allowing for supporting non-residential uses in our residential future land use categories. And so a great portion of this area is a residential future land use category of mixed density neighborhood. And if you look at that category on the ground today, its target ratio already exceeds its share of residential uses. And so I would assume if we went back and looked at the map again, we would still arrive at the same conclusion, which is that this area still lacks commercial activity. And we would try and encourage commercial land uses that could support the existing residential today. So I think we would have the same conversation about the lack of retail in this area. And I think that we would still try and stress supporting commercial uses in our residential areas, if that answers your question.
It helps. I'm also aware that the tendency in the real estate industry is for commercial to follow rooftops. So the question is, which comes first, the rooftops or the commercial? I am concerned about this being a major intersection for us on Westinghouse and 1460, and I hate to easily give away potential future commercial use of the site, and so that's what I'm trying to evaluate this evening. So you've helped me. I do understand the conflict in the target area ratios, and I appreciate the explanation. Commissioners, any other questions for staff at this point?
This is Marlene McMichael. I do have some questions. And
okay.
So Nat, I'm hoping you will help me understand a couple of things here, mostly to see if I'm on the same page. If you go back to your chart for your land use ratios, in both cases, it looks like the variance from what you want and what will happen under this is less than 1%. Is that correct?
Nat, you're muted. Nat, you're muted.
I apologize. If I'm understanding your question, ma'am, if the MF1 zoning is approved, the result will be a change of 1% decrease in commercial and an increase effectively of 1% residential. Is that your question, ma'am?
Well, I would say it's actually less than 1%, but we're in a target of about 1/2 to 1%. So it's minimal. And the vast majority of the land is still undeveloped, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Or in the ETJ, in which case we're subject to the development at the discretion of the property owner and have no land use controls there. So much of the property is in the ETJ.
Okay. I guess I'm just, when we're talking about a variable of less than 1%, I think we're pretty close to target. If it were 5-10%, I would probably be more concerned, but to me, it looks like we're pretty close to target.
I think what he's telling you, Marlene, is that the 1% is within the city's control, and a big chunk of that 50% is completely outside the city's control. So
yeah, I get that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm sorry. Any other questions from commissioners? All right. Thank you. Is the applicant here? Does the applicant wish to address the commission?
Yes, this is Matt Shepazado of Urban Genesis. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. Good evening and Happy New Year. I am going to share my screen and let me know if you guys can see it.
Yes, sir.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, before I jump into this, it's funny. I have a pleasant memory of Georgetown I'm going to share. It's random and short, but I do want to share it. So when I was headed to UT to attend it, I stopped at Interspace Caverns, and I was like, "What is Georgetown?" And so it's funny how the world evolves. And then I'm at a zoning meeting for our company for Georgetown. So Georgetown's got a great place in my heart, and I have one other story to share, but we'll save it for another meeting, and it has to do with the rattlesnake in Georgetown on this site. So I'll move on from that. But I myself am Matt Shepazada. I founded Urban Genesis May of 2013. And really our intent was to reimagine residential real estate in a format that was accommodative with the demand that we felt like was more consistent with the workforce that was emerging. We started out building single-family homes in Dallas and Austin and Houston, and then eventually morphed into a multifamily development company that specialized in an urban community that we really created and formed around, which is known as the High Line. So anything, if you're driving around Austin, you'll notice a couple projects named High Line or ending in High Line. Those are our communities. And what we reimagined there was we wanted to have communities that were serving what we called the missing middle. And the missing middle being the renter that was making anywhere from $45,000 to $75,000 a year, as we felt like the majority of the product that was coming online was not really matching necessarily the workforce that was coming online. And so as we evolved, our company grew into a vertically integrated platform. To date, we do about 3,000 units every 18 months all over Texas. We're in 5 markets. And now we are foot first into a new community that we have developed and oriented around. It's known as the Oasis. And that's the context for this particular project. The Oasis project and product is actually it's a morphing of single family and multifamily. It's a single family rental product, and it's oriented and with the goal of really bringing the rental conveniences and at times the affordability for someone that can't afford necessarily the residential single family density option in a wonderful city such as Georgetown, giving them the option to be able to live in a quality format neighborhood. And so the Oasis product was designed around that, and we'll be doing about 13 to 1,500 of those over the next 18 months. And our hope is that this particular track is part of that. And our goal with the communities is a lot of the balance of the single family rental communities that are being proposed and coming online are really going onto a lower end renter. And we felt like what's missing is a higher end version of the product. And a higher end version of the product, which we're going to show you sort of working examples of here in this presentation, really both focuses on the interiors, but namely the density and also the streetscape for the pedestrian user within the community, and also the amenity base serving them. And where we really intend to stand out is we want to be a higher end single family rental family community in great cities that are safe, with great schools, and can serve as a diversity housing option for someone that can't necessarily come up with a deposit for a single family home, or is looking for the conveniences of renting a home versus owning one. And so that's really the purpose of this, and the individuals responsible for the growth of this company, and also the main sort of development vehicle is myself when I'm speaking, and Gal Shalev, who actually runs Austin for us. He's on the phone and would be the one leading this project, and a couple other individuals that are not on this call but that are important to our team. There's about 40 of us overall. These are just some of the key contributors either to this project or to this market. With respect to the location, it's already been discussed. One of the things I just wanted to note here was currently on the balance of the site, the by right zoning on the back end accommodates and allows for roughly 180 units. What we're asking for is essentially to spread the 180 units across the balance of the site to get to that streetscape, higher end, lower density feel that we would need. And so really, we're not asking to add necessarily more units, but spread the density out. Then the aerial here just shows you, again, just a different view. But one of the things of note, as mentioned earlier, there's an active adult community just to the south, and there's an industrial, I want to say storage facility for trucking just to the north, and then storage to the north of that. And on the southern end, which is part of the track we're buying the master developer from, is a C1 zoning, and that's going to be reserved for zoning. And as the nearby services that were mentioned, we felt like the product was contextually appropriate for the services that are in the area, such as churches and schools, and obviously grocers in that regard. The future land use map, not going to reference it. I think we've seen it several times. And the Z rezoning application, this was the mention that we discussed. MF2 on our end is roughly 3.5 acres for the parcel that we're considering. MF1 is for the balance of the site that we need, and then C1 is the portion that we're asking for rezoning on. And so I'm really going to jump to the rationale. As I discussed earlier, our goal is to have a mixed-use variety of housing that is detached single-family, attached townhome product that is as dense as 4 units to one attached set, with the goal of all rear parking or parallel parking towards the front. So the streetscape feels like very much so like a single family neighborhood. And then with a centralized amenity, with a small leasing office, but really the amenity focused and spread out throughout the community with dog parks, playgrounds, and all the variety of other options that a nice single family community would want. With regard to the multifamily portion, our intent is both in scale to add visibility to the site and improve access. As you can see from the prior page, our current access is off Westinghouse and isn't supportive of the density. And so what we wanted to do was give us a better format to access the site from Westinghouse as well. And so in 1460. With regard to the balance of the site, as I mentioned, our seller, John Avery, he's not here tonight and he was trying to join, but as a proxy to him, he's committed to reserve the balance of the site as commercial. And actually, touching on Mr. Urkel, you mentioned rooftops and commercial. He specifically wrote us an email, and I'm sure we can have him write you guys a letter. Us providing the density of rooftops around the balance of the commercial will actually drive more activity. He hasn't had any in the process of owning the land. And so he both committed to us via email that we can reference as proxy that the balance of the site will be reserved solely for commercial. And in fact, it would help his ability to be able to develop and sell the balance of the sites that he owns as commercial. So to speak directly to that. And then with regard to
Matt,
yes.
hang on here. Could you kind of move this to conclusion, please, sir? Because you're way over your 5 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was told I had 10. My apologies.
No, not a problem. If you could just move along here, I would appreciate it.
Okay, sure. This is essentially the proposed site plan, including all the site that would accommodate the detention. And then the balance of the site, this is really, at the end of the day, pictures put in the words. What we would think is the facade's going to be more of an Austin-esque look with a combination of hardy and brick. The streetscape, as you can see, we don't want to have a bunch of garages in the front. We really want to have more of a neighborhood feel. And then at the bottom, it's a neighborhood that ultimately we're really basing our base design on, which is known as Bella Casa in Frisco. If anyone wants to Google that, it's the quality and the density of the neighborhood we're trying to emulate here. And then with respect to justification for the petition, as mentioned, this does provide a diversity of housing options within the comprehensive plan. We believe the ingress and egress are accommodated with less congestion, and the zoning is compatible with the present zoning and conforms to the uses nearby as well. And as you'll notice in the site plan, it adds a diverse set of townhomes, detached and attached single-family homes.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? I don't see any hands going up. So I will go ahead and move to the public hearing. I'm going to open the public hearing. And is there anyone here this evening that would like to address the commission? Now's the time to do so. Please use the raise your hand function on the participant window or speak up however you wish to do it.
Chair, we do not have any names listed in the chat, but we do have a hand raised. Christina Beck.
Okay, I didn't see that. Oh, it's over in the attendees. Okay. Christiana, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Planning and Zoning Commission.
By the way, you have 3 minutes, please.
Okay, I'll be less than that. I just wanted to point out I'm working.
Could you give us your address as well, please? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Don't want to interrupt you. Time hasn't started.
It's Christiana Beck, 1511 Justin Lane, Austin, Texas.
Thank you.
And I work with the landowner to sell the property. So I just wanted to throw out that I was involved in the sale to the age-restricted group, and that I'm also working with Gall's group. Just to let y'all know, since groundbreaking for that age-restricted community, the level of calls have definitely increased for the commercial properties. The hard corner has sold and will be a Circle K and a car wash combination. And then next week, there's a 3-acre site that will sell to Wellspring Preparatory Academy, which is a high-end daycare school. And I've got lots of activity on the remaining commercial sites, but I think the more rooftops, the better. And having the access to 1460 for this multifamily project, looking as nice as it does, will definitely help the remaining property develop commercially. And just wanted to say that, and I'm available for questions too if anyone needs.
Thank you, Christiana. Any other speakers who would like to address the commission at this time? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring this item up to the dais and commissioners. As to this item, we are tasked with providing a recommendation to the city council. Do I have any thoughts or comments or a motion?
This is Kayla McCord. It appears that the primary issue here is that this proposed zoning change doesn't really support the target ratios under our future land uses. I'm conflicted though, because it does seem to provide a very appropriate transition between the commercial uses that will undoubtedly go in right on the intersection and the uses north of that. And it's certainly compatible with existing zoning. And it seems that it doesn't significantly impact target ratios, but the impact is there. And I'm just a little conflicted on what the more persuasive facts really are.
Okay, thank you. Other commissioners? Travis, any comments?
Yeah. Do we need to have a second on the motion before we discuss that?
We don't have a motion. We have no motion. We're in the discussion mode right now.
Well, I'm mostly had a question, would be for Nat, but there was a comment made by the developer about wanting to increase their access to the property. Can you go over how access is going to play out for 1460 as all this develops? Because I know we've had questions in the past about connectivity of parcels and things of that sort. So does this zoning have any impact on that? And what is their access here look like?
So we asked our development engineer, David Monk, to take a look. There is an existing driveway out there today, which seems to support this particular property in either zoning configuration. On 1460, given the separation and that it is existing on the property.
And it is a driveway that would it meets separation requirements.
Yes, according to our development engineer.
Okay. Okay.
And so would that driveway be shared with the remainder of the property to gain access? So the additional tracts that are not included here, would those have to share that drive?
The problem with that question, Travis, is that it's not a zoning issue. The actual site development doesn't occur until after they get their zoning done, because they're not coming in for a PUD. Things like driveway separation or setbacks or materials or landscaping, those are all pertinent questions for the development process, but they're not things that would occur as a part of the zoning ordinance. Because we can't, even if the applicant said, "Oh, I'll share it," it's not an enforceable component part to the zoning motion.
Right. I just know that in the past there's these properties end up being connected. So I was trying to decipher, based on the zoning, what type of properties could potentially be sharing a access point, which is how I was relating it to zoning.
I got you. Okay. Marlene, any questions?
Just one, and that's a to Nat as well. If Mr. Avery does develop the remainder of the parcel commercial, what does that do to your ratios?
I'd like to be able to answer you with some accuracy. I'd need to go in to look at the total acreage remaining and count up those parcels. If I just do a quick glance at what's undeveloped within that, I'd really like to be able to kind of dive back into that analysis, if that's okay. It takes a little bit of arithmetic.
Could I submit that if he does that, it can't hurt your ratios?
Certainly, if we go back to the percent share of non-residential in the community center, it is at 27% today on the ground. If those properties did develop in a non-residential manner, that would move the percentage of 27 up, the target being 80. So it would definitely move us closer to that 80. There's about 50 acres that are either in the ETJ or ag that are still in that community center that are undeveloped. So just kind of looking at the size of those parcels that are remaining in that community center, that we could actually, we could zone because they're in the city limits. I'd have to look at those, but it doesn't look like anywhere near. Well, I'd like to look at those numbers again if I could, but looking at some of the remaining tracts, there are about 1 acre and 5 acre tracts remaining. So, assumably that would move it less than 10%. I think, just giving you a rough number, maybe move it to 37%.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any other comments? And the floor is open.
This is Marlene again. I well understand that commercial doesn't come until there are rooftops. I also like this product. I think it's a product that Georgetown is in need of. And so I'm going to move that we approve this request.
So you have a motion to recommend to the council approval of the request?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do I have a second? Well, I'm going to second it just so that we have a motion to vote on. So I'm going to second that. All right. Any discussions or comments?
Yeah, I've got one more question, Ursula. This is Travis.
Sure.
So, explain to me again on the ratio, from the ratio standpoint. Your ratios are only including what property?
The ratios are the overall ratio is for the area around the intersection, and the gross numbers include more than this property, even include over into the Terra Vista. So I think when he's saying he's got 1,200 acres as a base in there, or some number like that, it's a much greater area than this parcel that we're looking at, 7 acres that we're looking at, which is why the 7 acres doesn't move the needle very much one way or the other. Does that help you?
Yeah, well, can you go to page 14 on your presentation?
Sure. Are you looking for Mr. Protheus, are you looking for the graphs again, or are you looking for something different?
So not that page, the next one. Okay, so looking at this page, your total area is 117.66, correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah, for the community
We're
center.
looking
node.
at we're looking at 2.7. So making a recommendation for approval on this would move it to 22.1. So we're already on the wrong side of the line, leaving that additional 50.7 essentially would have to all come in as commercial in order to get even close to what our mark is. Am I looking at that right?
You're correct.
You are, sir. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Okay, if we have no other comments, Myrna, I'm going to ask you to call the roll, please.
Kayla McCord,
Yes.
Marlene McMichael,
Yes.
Travis Berthius,
No.
Ursula Brashear.
Yes. So the motion carries 3-1. Thank you. That moves us to item AL. This is file number 2020-28-REZ. Andriana, good evening.
Good evening, Commission. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Okay, so please, if you can please all confirm when you are able to see the presentation.
It's ready now.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So tonight we have another zoning map amendment, and this time is a rezoning request for a property that's just a little bit less than an acre. And they're proposing to rezone this property from the office zoning district to the residential single family zoning district for the property that's located at 1801 Candy Street. If you look at the location map in front of you, the subject property is highlighted in red. And as you can see, it's located right there just south of the intersection of where Candy Street terminates and intersects with West 18th Street. It's located just east of Railroad Avenue in approximately about 1,900 feet south of University Avenue, just to the north. Looking at the aerial map, as you can see here, the subject property is currently developed, and it has been developed with a single family resident home from quite some time now, actually. But it is also located within, as you can see here, an established residential neighborhood that actually includes both a mix of different residential products. You have some single family residential, specifically to the north, into the northwest area. You have some multifamily development also to the north and actually kind of like surrounding the property. If we go clockwise from north to east to south, you have some of that Georgetown Housing Authority multifamily product. Immediately to the west, you do have some single family residential, but then further out to the west, you have a city-owned property that was dedicated for parkland at the time that this subdivision was actually platted. And then further southeast of the property, closer to where Austin Avenue would be located, you'll see some commercial development, including some retail and some office development. And so because of the mix of uses, the mix of densities, residential products, the mix of also non-residential uses that we see here, especially further to the south and to the east of this area, at the time that we updated the 2030 plan last year, this whole area was designated with the community center future land use destination. And this destination is an area that's actually typically located in nodes, but it can also cover large areas, such as in this particular case. And it's meant to be able to encourage and promote for some neighborhood serving commercial uses, such as local retail, professional office, and some other personal services. However, it does also envision to be able to have supporting residential uses, especially any residential uses that are to the medium and high density level, with a minimum dwelling unit of 14 dwelling units an acre or more. And so when we look here at the zoning district, as you can see here, the subject property is currently zoned office. And you also still have some office zoning district surrounding this property, especially to the north, to the east, and to the south. And as you may recall, this is an area of the city where previously it had a zoning district that allowed for both office and residential types of uses in that zoning district. However, when the UDC was adopted in 2003, and with that adoption, the city adopted new zoning districts. A lot of these older zoning districts were converted. And so what used to be before that RAM zoning district, which was the previous zoning district, all this area converted to the office zoning district today, which actually does not allow for residential uses. And so that's the reason why you see a lot of these single family and multifamily uses to now being non-conforming uses as a result of that conversion. But slowly you can also see here that some of these properties have been rezoned to its high density multifamily zoning district. A lot of the single family residential lots that were developed as such have their residential single family zoning district. And then further here to the south and to the southeast, where you have a lot of that commercial development, closer to Austin Avenue, closer to Leander, you see some C3 general commercial as well as some industrial zoning district. And so the residential single family that's being requested tonight, it's really meant to allow for a medium density residential product that it's primarily your single family residential, both either attached or detached type of the development. And so because of the minimum lot sizes that is allowed within this district, it's considered to be that medium density type of development. And because of that, it's also determined to be appropriate next to some of that neighborhood friendly commercial or some of that office zoning districts. And so in the blue box, you'll see some of the dimensional standards that are allowed within this zoning district, including your minimum lot width of 45 feet, your minimum setbacks, and then your maximum building height of 35 feet. And so some of the uses that are permitted within this zoning district, as mentioned, it is primarily meant to accommodate for your traditional detached single family, so that use is definitely permitted by right. But you can see other uses that may be permitted there, such as group homes. Some uses permitted with limitations, meaning that they have to comply with additional design standards in order for that use to be able to be accommodated there, include attached single family, churches, home-based businesses, neighborhood amenity centers, and then some uses that would require approval of a special use permit by the City Council following a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission, include uses such as accessory dwelling unit, community center, a group daycare, hospice facility, and so forth. And so staff reviewed the criteria, the request against the approval criteria for a zoning map amendment, and we found that it complied with 4 of the criteria, but partially complied with 1 of them. Specifically, we found that the application that was submitted, the request that was submitted was a complete application. We had all the information that was needed for us to be able to do the analysis and present that to the Planning and Zoning Commission City Council, and therefore we found that it complies. We found that it partially complied with the comprehensive plan. And the reason for this, as mentioned earlier in the presentation, this property is located right now within an area that has been designated as community center. And again, the reason for why this area was designated community center has to do with a mix of the uses that are included and found within this area, including the commercial, the industrial uses, the high density multifamily, but it also does encompass some of the areas of properties that are single family residential developed right now. You know, Nat mentioned in his previous presentation about how the future land use is a bubble map, and therefore those, you know, the boundary lines are not, you know, hard, fast geographic boundaries as set in stones, but are actually boundaries that can move back and forward. And so when we look at this area, in order for us to really be able to take a more in-depth look in regards to determining the boundaries for that future land use destination, we would have had to do something more on a parcel to parcel basis, which is not the guidance of the comprehensive plan. And so that is why it includes a lot more property for that. But it is the community center that does encourage and it does envision for supporting residential uses at a much higher density than what the single family residential zoning district allows. And in that regards, we found that it did not comply. However, when we looked at the target ratios, you know, the community center has a target ratio of 20% residential, 80% non-residential. we actually found when we looked at the existing conditions based on this overall big area, because of the amount of both residential and non-residential uses that are exist in there, it currently has a target ratio of 54% residential, 46% non-residential. Due to the size of this area, which consists of approximately 166 acres, and the size of the subject property in comparison to that, which is less than an acre, about 0.5%, there really is no change to that ratio. The ratio that it exists today will remain should this zoning map amendment request actually be approved. And the other area where we did found that it complied with the comprehensive plan is that this zoning district would actually promote for more infill development within an established residential neighborhood. If you recall with the aerial map, this property is located in the middle of the block that has already developed properties surrounding it on all 4 sides. And this zoning district would actually be able to allow for that property to potentially be further subdivided in compliance with the residential single family zoning district and allow for further infill development consistent with the character of the neighborhood. Which brings me to the next criteria where we found it, where in regards to the zoning change promoting the health, safety, general welfare, and the orderly and healthful development of the city, we found that it did comply with that criteria because the RS zoning district would actually allow a more appropriate type of development that's consistent with these surrounding land uses of your single family uses that you have there. Even though it's a multifamily development, it's actually a lower type of a density multifamily development that exists because you have single story, small buildings encompassing that. So it would promote for that orderly development by imposing more a zoning district that has more stringent zoning standards. And then we also found that it is compatible with the present zoning and conforming uses of the nearby properties. As mentioned, it is in the middle of an established neighborhood that is surrounded by a lot of single family home or by some low density multifamily development that in character and look and feel is more sort of like your single family type of residential development. And so we found that it is compatible and consistent with that criteria. And then we also found that the property is suitable for all the uses that may be permitted in the residential single family zoning district in compliance with all the standards of that district. And so as required by the UDC and our local government code, notices were sent out to all the property owners and registered neighborhood associations within 300 feet, as well as notice placed on the newspaper and signs posted on the property. To date, we have not received any comments in relation to this request. And so in summary, this is a public hearing and request for a zoning map amendment to rezone approximately 0.89 acres from the office zoning district to the residential single family zoning district. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Andreina. Commissioners, any questions for Andreina? All right, I'm not seeing any hands go up and no questions at this point. Thank you very much, Andreina. Is the applicant here and does the applicant wish to make a presentation?
I do not see the applicant, Chair.
Okay, that's fine. The applicant's not here, then we'll open the public hearing. Is anyone here this evening that would like to address this matter, address the commission on this matter? Now's the time to do so. Do we have anyone signed up to speak?
No, sir, I do not see any hands raised or names listed in the chat. And there's no attendees that are calling in by phone at this moment.
Okay, thank you. I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, as to this item, what is your recommendation to the city council?
This is Travis. I recommend approval as presented.
Okay, you have a motion to recommend approval as presented. Do we have a second?
Kayla McCord, second.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments, or discussion? Myrna, call the roll, please.
Kayla McCord,
Yes.
Marlene McMichael,
Yes.
Travis Berthius,
Yes.
Ursula Brashear.
Yes, so the motion carries 4-0. Thank you very much. That takes us to item AM, and that is file number 2020-33-REZ. Mr. Clark, welcome.
Good evening, commissioners. Give me 1 second. Let me get my screen up. All right, commissioners, can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
All righty. So this is a rezoning request at 1010 Clay Street, case number 2233 REZ. Screen. All right, this is a public hearing and possible action on a request for a zoning map amendment to rezone approximately 2.43 acres out of the Nicholas Porter Survey, abstract number 497, from the local commercial district C1 to the general commercial district C3, property generally located at 1010 Clay Street. As you can see here on the map, it's located at the northwest intersection of Clay Street and the southbound frontage road of Interstate 35. Just south of it, you can see Williams Drive. To the west, the Rivery Boulevard extension, and to the north, the Northwest Boulevard extension. Looking at the aerial, you can see that's right next to the Days Inn off the frontage road, as well as the roadway into the south. Just past that is the Plaka Greek Cafe, you're probably aware of, and the old McCoy School site that has recently been demolished and is now vacant. What'll come up in the conversation later on, as you'll see, is that there's a residential neighborhood directly west of the property. That northern portion of Park Lane that you see, the arrow pointing at, is single family residential, even though it's zoned otherwise, which we'll talk about in the next slide. And the southern portion of Park Lane, south of Clay Street, that is a mixture of commercial uses as well as some multifamily housing before going into full commercial near Williams Drive. On the featured land use map, you'll see that this is located in a special area. That's because this site is part of the Williams Drive Gateway Plan. Also of note is it's along the highway corridor, and this is part of the Gateway Overlay District. We'll get into that a bit later. Looking at the Williams Drive Gateway Plan's future land use map, you'll see that this property has been designated highway commercial. You'll see that bordering it on Park Lane, you'll find high density mixed housing, and going north of that, you'll see that gets into medium density mixed housing and transitions even further to less intensive housing uses. Along William Drive, you'll of course see the urban mixed use future land use designation. A little bit of background for this is the Williams Drive Gateway Plan came from the Williams Drive study that occurred in 2017. That study recommended a plan that addresses access management strategies, multimodal transportation elements, safety, and operational improvement. From that Gateway plan, we were able to come up with from that Williams Drive study in 2017, we were able to come up with the Williams Drive Gateway Plan. This plan calls for a development pattern that is different from our typical forms of development, and that's why you'll see that this is a special area plan. We're looking for something that really helps this area become a vibrant mixed-use center. You'll find that the highway commercial has a little bit more nuance than your typical commercial development along the interstate, and seeks to be the outer bounds of this mixed-use area. You'll see in the land use ratio, the highway commercial is actually designated for 100% non-residential uses. And then from this serving as the boundary for that highway commercial area that's meant to have large-scale retail, auto-focused development that serves people coming in off the interstate, and from the greater community, we transition into some higher density uses, the urban mixed use, and then that transitions into less intensive uses. But again, this highway commercial designation is meant to be the large-scale retail boundary of this area. As I've kind of gotten into, highway commercial provides for large-scale retail amenities while still encouraging neighborhood retail. This isn't something that's meant to inherently be only big box, but rather something that can be big box just because it's located along the interstate, but it can also be something that conforms with the neighborhoods behind it. Acceptable uses include big box retail, lodging, offices, medical offices, retail and restaurants. primary use of retail, secondary use of commercial, office, institutional, and civic uses. So again, this is going to be 100% non-residential. This isn't meant for housing. This is meant as a commercial hub. So I kind of went into that a little bit. Just one thing I'd note is that the undeveloped commercial space, it's pretty high. You know, a lot of this, as you've seen on the aerial, is yet to be touched. You know, it sat here. In fact, this property specifically was annexed into the city in 1954. It sat vacant since then. It originally came in as a commercial district when we came up with the C1, C3, C2 separation. This property got changed to C1 and has sat that way since then, again, undeveloped. If you're looking along the interstate, you'll see that, you know, there's a variety of C1 and C3, but primarily C3 with some C1. So you'll see that this C3 will match that. Now to get into the neighborhood, as we discussed, that single family portion that was along here is actually zoned for 2-family and office uses. So those single family houses are actually legal non-conforming uses. Again, you get the RS kind of further in, but at least what's immediately, you're having some legal non-conforming single family, as well as the multifamily, like I said, further south on Park Lane, and commercial space along the interstate. Also of note, in terms of the zoning discussion, since this property borders Interstate Highway 35, it will be subject to Gateway Overlay District's addition standards, which can be found in UDC Section 4 and 8, and those just discuss enhanced aesthetic features to help identify and give a good positive interaction with Georgetown. So general commercial C3 district, it's meant to be commercial and retail activities that serve the entire community. It's as opposed to the C1, which is neighborhood focused and much more locally focused. This can be large in scale and generate substantial traffic. As we're kind of seeing, it's only appropriate along freeways and major arterials. The difference between these two, between C3 and C1, that you'll see at least dimensionally, is that there's no floor to area ratio in C3, whereas in C1, they cap it at a 0.5 floor to area ratio. Maximum building height is increased from 35 to 60 if this zone change was to be approved. They both have buffer yards, but as we've mentioned, that because of that, the bordering single family housing being zoned for office rather than RS, the buffer yard requirements of C1 and C3 would not be required. So this property wouldn't be required to have buffer yards in between it and the immediately bordering single family houses. That's just something to keep in mind. They already can develop it without the buffer yards, but that should be noted. There is a rear setback to C3. Looking at the uses, you get stuff like theaters that are initially permitted in that are currently permitted in C1 with limitations. You see that going into C3 that they're permitted by right and don't have those limitations. You see more intensive uses like auto repair and service, athletic facilities, fuel cells, kennels, small engine repair. Just more intensive uses that aren't necessarily neighborhood appropriate. With SUP, you get even bigger things like bus barns, manufactured housing cells, and whatnot, but those would need an SUP. Again, we already went into that. The key differences in terms of dimensional standards. So looking at the approval criteria, after staff's review, staff found that this request is compliant with 3 of 5 of the approval criteria and partially complied with 2 of 5. Looking at this first approval criteria, we found that the application was of course complete and that the applicant gave us all the information we needed to do an adequate review and take a final action. Found it complied there. We found, as we've discussed earlier, we found that this zone change from C1 to C3 is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Highway commercial and C3 seem to mesh. We're looking at large scale retail that's located along the highway. We're looking at how this serves as the most intense border to the Williams Drive Gateway Plan, how it lies along the interstate highway corridor. For the next criteria, in terms of how this zone change could promote the health, safety, and general welfare and the safe, orderly, and healthful development, we found that it partially complies. We found that the staff found that while it complies with standards the city's already set out in place, and it is appropriately located along a frontage road, we did have to note that in terms of that neighborhood being there, wasn't compliant in the sense that the traffic generated by the C3 zoning district could potentially have negative effects and not be quite conforming with the single family houses that are located right past this property along Clay Street and into Park Lane. The zoning map again, just so you can see again that we've got the C1 next to the Park Lane, the housing along there. The next approval criteria, this also was a partially complies. We found that upon review, the zone change is compatible with present zoning conforming uses in the neighborhood. We found that it was compliant with the present zoning and the conforming uses of nearby property. Staff found that it complied in terms of how it's next to office district and how it's next to C1 and C3. So staff found that it was compliant in that sense. We did have to note that it wasn't compliant in terms of the character of the neighborhood, at least in what's existing there, because of those single family houses. But again, of note, those are legal non-conforming uses that were they to be demolished and redeveloped, they'd have to be developed with something that would be conforming with C3. Finally, the final criteria, property to be rezoned suitable for uses permitted by the district to be applied by the proposed amendment. Staff found that the property is developable, large enough in size that it could accommodate C3 development. Public notice, as my colleagues have priorly stated, this required public notification. From that, 21 property owners were notified within 300-foot buffer. We posted notice in the Sun News on December 20th, 2020. And along with posting signs on the property, staff has received 1 written comment in favor and 0 written comments in opposition to this zone map amendment. So, public hearing and possible action on a request for a zoning map amendment to rezone 2.43 acres located at 1010 Clay Street from local commercial to general commercial. That concludes what I have to say. I'm available for questions, and the applicant also wanted me to notify you that he is here. He doesn't have a presentation, but he is here for questions. His name's Josh Baran. I think I got his name right, but I apologize, Josh, if I got that wrong.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it. Commissioners, any questions for staff? Not hearing anyone, I will ask a question, and this goes back to the analysis that you did. You go back to the screen showing the partial compliance.
Yes, sir.
Okay. There are two zoning changes. The zoning change promotes the health, safety, or general welfare of the city, and it says a partially complies, and that's because of the conflict that you see between the existing grandfathered residential use and the proposed zoning change. It's that conflict that caused you to say that this is a partial comply?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, we found that with those existing residential uses being as low intensity as they are, and again, they're grandfathered, they're legal non-conforming, but just looking at how Clay Street, how this property takes up that entrance essentially into those neighborhoods, that higher intensity, more traffic generating uses of C3, may not potentially mesh well with what's currently there.
Does the C3 zoning further the goals of the Williams Drive Gateway Plan here?
Yes, sir. We found that it does. Again, the Williams Drive Gateway Plan noted this as highway commercial. Large scale retail is what highway commercial is looking for. I think it's also important to keep in mind that again, while it's a residential neighborhood nearby, those properties are legal non-conforming, and were they to be tore down, they would ideally be rebuilt with higher density, mixed housing, something that's more intensive and more in line with the highway commercial that we're seeking to put there. But yes, I think that staff has found that this request would help accomplish the goals of the William Drive Gateway Plan.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Commissioners, any questions for Ryan this evening? All right, so the applicant is present but doesn't have a presentation necessarily, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. He is here.
Okay.
If y'all have any questions of him.
All right, any questions for the applicant? All right, not hearing any, I'm going to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here this evening that would like to address this matter? Now is your time to do so. Are you seeing anyone show up on your screen, Sophia?
No, sir, I do not see any names in the chat, and I do not see any hands raised. We do have one attendee, but it does not appear that they are unmuting themselves to speak on this item.
Okay, well, the door is open if anyone wants to speak, and if I'm not seeing that or hearing that, then I'm going to close the public hearing. And commissioners, as to this item, what is your recommendation to the City Council?
Kayla McCord, move to recommend approval of the subject proposal.
Okay, thank you, Kayla. Do I have a second?
Marlene McMichael, I'll second.
Thank you, Marlene. Any discussion or comment? Myrna, call the roll, please.
Kayla McCord,
Yes.
Marlene McMichael,
Yes.
Travis Berthius,
Yes.
Ursula Brashear.
Yes, so the motion carries 4-0. Thank you very much. And that takes us to item AN. This is Wesley Wright. Good evening, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Brashear. Happy New Year to everybody. My name is Wesley Wright. I'm your engineering director. Work with David and Lua on a lot of the engineering items. Fortunately, y'all don't have to deal with me too much, but I do have one real quick administrative item for you to consider. It is with regards to the electric utility service availability letter that is required in the UDC. Currently, we require a new developer to provide what is a will serve letter for their development, an electric will serve letter, confirming that they have electricity to the site. And that letter needs to specify that the development will comply with the Unified Development Code. Well, we're running into some issues with the electric providers. As you know, there are three. There's PEC, there's the City of Georgetown, and there's Oncor. But the electric utility providers have a little bit of an issue with affirming that the code will be followed. Not that they have a problem following the code, but that fundamentally the costs associated with following the code are the developer's responsibility, the applicant's responsibility. From a practical standpoint, the electric providers are just the contractors that are hired by the developer. They do what they're paid to put in. It is the developer, the applicant's responsibility to comply with the code. So we would like your permission and council's permission after you to modify the language just ever so slightly to still require the will serve letter from the electric utility. That's their business and they're happy to provide that. But that the affirmation of compliance with the code would come from the applicant, the developer, the owner. That's all this change is being requested. And the developers that we've spoken with, they're all happy to provide that letter. And we have worked with the electric providers and weren't really able to find acceptable language that would get them comfortable with the way it's written. So we feel like the appropriate thing is to just make this administrative change to our code. The caption on the item reads, public hearing and possible action on an executive text amendment to Chapter 16 of the Unified Development Code, UDC, relative to the definition of an electric utility services availability letter. I'll be happy to answer questions, or Mr. Chairman, if you want to open the public hearing first. I'm not familiar with how you prefer to do that, but I'm happy to do whatever you'd like.
Well, I'm gonna take advantage of the system we have in place to ask you a question first.
Yes, sir.
Where does the conflict come in between the UDC, which establishes a set of criteria for construction activity, and where's that coming into play? I guess these are in ETJ area.
It's not necessarily city limits or ETJ, and there's not necessarily a conflict. The concern is more of a philosophical, fundamentally philosophical concern by the electric utilities, that if in the course of providing a will serve letter, they give that to the
become responsible. That's what you're saying.
They become liable. That's their concern. Yes, sir. Is that
what you're doing? You're trying to shift that language change, shifts that responsibility from the entity providing the electric service to the party that's actually doing the development.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay.
We've not run it, for the record, we've not run into any instances where this has been a major conflict. But now that it's being asked to be put in writing by the electric utilities, they've run it by their attorneys, and they're fundamentally exposed to the potential risk that expose them to.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions for Wes?
This is Kayla McCord. I'm just a little bit confused.
Yes,
Does this actually shift the responsibility from the provider to the developer, or does it simply clarify that the developer must commit to taking that responsibility?
I feel like it's just a clarification. I know of no scenario where the electric provider has provided a quote, let's say for overhead installation, and then the developer came back and said, oh, well, I have to go underground per the UDC, and the electric utility was forced to bear that cost. We, as an electric utility, have run into instances like that where there was a lack of clarity when we provided a cost estimate. But this is more of a clarification. I really feel that's what it is. The utilities feel that's what it is. And I think the development community understands and respects that it's their cost to comply with the code as well. And it just clarifies the franchise utilities. They have what's called a franchise agreement, which dictates the terms on which they can be in our right of way. And the UDC dictates the terms by which a property can develop. And I think it's just a clarification.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it possible that the city's electrical service provision requirements exceed what, say, PEC would be requesting? In other words, we may be saying UDC is going to require you to go underground, but PEC says, no, we're happy with going overhead. Is that a conflict that this addresses? And that we're using the UDC to force everything underground, for example?
This specific change does not address that. This specific change is just who provides the letter and who is making that commitment. But to your point, that is the underlying concern is, yes, the UDC goes above and beyond and requires a higher standard for development with regards to electric utilities and other utilities than the state requires. Electric providers are typically allowed to go overhead. You know, they can purchase an easement, they can purchase their own right of way, and they can go overhead. Well, if you're going to develop in the city of Georgetown, in certain instances, a lot of instances, you have to go underground. And that is not necessarily the electric provider's cost. It is an enhancement that is typically paid for by the developer. Generally, the way this works, and I've been on the other side. I've developed residential lots in the Dallas area. And generally, electric providers have what's called an allowable expenditure. And generally, that allowable expenditure covers the overhead costs. And they put in overhead for, quote, free because they're getting the customers. Generally, the way this works is the developers put in the conduit and the transformer pads, all of the underground, what we call the civil engineering work, and then the electric providers come in and pull the wire. That's generally what is done. The electric providers are concerned that if they provide a letter to us saying they will comply with the code, that the developers could then force that compliance on the expense of the electric providers, which has never been the intent of the code.
Okay. But there's no question that underground is a lot more expensive per mile than overhead.
There may be one or two scenarios where that's not true, but in general, no. Underground is more expensive. Yes, it's a different type of wire, and then you have the conduit to go with it. It is more expensive. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. I'm going to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here that would like to address this issue? Now's the time to do so. Anyone signed up, Sophia?
No, sir. I do not see any hands raised and no names in the chat either.
Okay. Then I'm going to close the public hearing. And commissioners, as to this item, what is your recommendation to the city council?
This is Travis. I'll make a recommendation to approve as presented.
Okay. Thank you, Travis. Do I have a second? Well, I'll second it. So we now have a motion and a second. Any discussion or comments? Myrna, call the roll, please.
Kayla McCord,
Yes.
Marlene McMichael,
Yes.
Travis Berthius,
Yes.
Ursula Brashear.
Yes. So the motion carries 4-0. Thank you, Wes.
Thank you all for your time.
You bet. Good evening to you. That
Same to
takes us to item AO, discussion. Sophia, any questions, comments, or anything that you'd like to address this evening? You're muted.
Thank
That's
you.
the best you've sounded in a while.
Thank you. No updates, just a happy new year to everybody.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Updates from other boards and commission meetings. GTAB has not had a meeting, but the mobility committee has put together its list of proposed roadway transportation improvements for the upcoming bond proposal, or it's going to the council for them to consider and act on for the May election period. And then the impact fee committee is moving towards coming up with a recommendation for adopting impact fees for transportation contributions for new projects coming online in the city. So those two things are coming down the pipeline here. Do we have any questions or comments from alternate members about anything that was on the agenda this evening?
No, it's a learning experience.
Thank you, Jerry. Okay, just a reminder, our January 19th meeting is still scheduled as a teleconference starting at 6 p.m. Need a motion to adjourn.
This is Marlene. I'll move we adjourn.
Okay, thank you, Marlene. Second.
Kayla McCord, second.
Okay, thank you. Myrna, call the roll, please.
Kayla McCord,
Yes.
Marlene McMichael, Marlene,
I'm unmuted, but you couldn't hear me. Yes. Thank you.
Travis Berthius,
Yes.
Ursula Brashear.
Yes, and so that's 4-0. It passes. The meeting is adjourned at 7:47 p.m. Thank you very much, everybody. Happy New Year, and appreciate your participation tonight.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Please stay well.